This is so lovely to be here again with Jim Langley. Hi, Jim. How are you doing?
Good morning, Lewis, or good afternoon, or wherever we are. Hello, everyone.
So, everybody that's here today, if you don't already know Jim, Jim leads a firm called Langley Innovations. He's a thought leader, mentor. I don't know. There's so many adjectives for you, Jim. But we're really happy to be here with you and maybe chat a little bit about last year, next year, what
Yeah,
you have coming up that is exciting. How does that sound?
that sounds great. So happy to be with everyone and appreciate everyone's time. Let's just please feel free to start putting what you'd like to talk about into the what is it, private chat? Is that there we go? Some people are coming on board there. So anything that's on your mind that you'd like us to address, but first of all, we are transitioning from one year to the next. Have you looked back at the last giving windows, including for those of us in the US, Giving Tuesday? That also might be bigger than US, might be Canada, might be elsewhere. I don't know. You can let me know. Have you looked at what came in on Giving Tuesday versus what came in the last week of the year? So, always a fascinating comparison for the energy we throw at Giving Tuesday, and I don't know that we have a choice these days, versus observing a long held human behavior by so many people choosing to give in the last week of the year because that's how their systems are set up, right? And so, as we look into both of those windows, what are you seeing in terms of volume? What are you seeing in terms of loyal donors coming back? Are we deconstructing that data and saying, first, how many first time donors? And what's the immediate follow up to them? We don't want to wait too long to have some simple humanistic outreach to them, whether it's a poll, a quick survey, a text, something that's personalized. So, what do we want to do with those brand new donors? Sort of say, we noticed you, welcome, come on in. And we're not just going to solicit you once a year, but bring you into our conversations. That's incredibly important. Are we deconstructing that data to see how many loyalists re-upped, and are we going to do anything to personalize that data if they hit 10, 15, 20 years? Get that message out to them quickly, even if it's a handful of people. How many people, for instance, might have given for 30 years is not an enormous number. So certainly we can personalize that with some sort of outreach. But this is the time of year where you look at what you harvested at the end of the year and how you can then start planting seeds of regeneration as early as possible and nurture those seeds throughout the year. So guess what? At bare minimum, when we get back into that harvest, which when we think about annual giving is more in the fall, more fruitful in the fall, what we've done in the preceding 6, 7 months is systematically, strategically nurtured that goodwill, nurtured that affinity. And so I hope we can start thinking about that as we do about agronomy, that these things are purposeful, that we have to have a plan, and that we have to be attentive to, very important kinds of things, both nutrients and remarkable sustainability and growth among our our potential sources. Now, ever more important, why? Because in most places, vast majority of places, a decline in giving households, right? So we have to be better at husbanding than ever before. So this is a time of reflection and to really think about creating more virtuous, viable patterns going forward, but doing it systematically. And I've written about that, and maybe others have as well. So we can share that information with you. Then what did we learn in this last year? What did we see? Well, one of the things I wrote about that you may have seen is, from everything I can tell, the most disruptive philanthropic behavior, and philanthropic behaviors, like all behaviors, don't change that much. There was significant change in giving in the last year, and food banks seem to be the largest recipient of it. That when people started giving to a new entity, a new nonprofit, that most of them chose food banks as the best response to what was happening with COVID-19. They liked the fact that they were local, And as I mentioned in my post, what was particularly compelling was they could see the lines. So what Lewis and I have talked a lot about, and I give Lewis credit for just keep pushing this button, is trust. Don't walk past that. Don't walk past this issue of trust. Even you go, well, our donors trust us. Wait a minute. Trust is in the atmosphere. It's in the ether. Trust is now a part of the way we look at the world or not, right? So as mass marketing has gotten to be more slick, as people can say just about anything and make it look plausible, as most people have bought a product or service and been disappointed by it, the natural human response is to be a little more leery the next time. So we may have trust, but if we get into hyperbole in some of our cases for support, if we get into overstatement, if we seem a little too slick, a little bit too like Madison Avenue, if we lose that human touch, what happens is they call upon that limbic portion of their brain and go, oh, that looks like the thing that kind of bit me before or disappointed me before. So we got to look like a friend. We got to look like caring people. We got to look like, what we are at our best and keep showing them that, and understand that that mistrust is in the modern era is so easily triggered because of so much hype, overstatement, advertisement, speak, et cetera, et cetera. And as I said, general disappointment somewhere in our lives and in our recent history was something that was promised and not delivered, right? Overstatement. So watch that. Let's be more authentic going forward. So I'd say those are really important lessons from last year and things that we could be more attentive to this year. All right. Are we
Thanks,
getting
Jim.
anything in from people who are wanting us to talk about anything in particular? So Lewis
No, but
asked about,
I did ask folks, so how are you communicating based on Jim's suggestions? How are you communicating with your donors that maybe gave to you in the fall? And Jim had posted actually a template or a series of ideas, right? Jim,
yes,
that I found immensely valuable, and it had all my, the cogs in my brain turning as to, well, now how do we actually make this happen, right?
right.
Um,
Got to
and
operationalize it, got to make somebody in charge of it. But it's so important that we seize the initiative now, right? This is the critical moment. I had a conversation just before this with somebody who's on talking about loyal giving to a particular institution. We don't need to mention the name. We're not here to scold, but to learn. And she was sharing that, they started a loyal donor program, but then it looked like they sort of automated it. And as the year unfolded and started to get closer and closer to the end, their messaging was in and around, you've only got a month more to retain your loyalty status. I mean, talk about a kind of you're missing what loyalty is about. It's something to be celebrated by us, not used as if you don't re-up, you won't be loyal. You're not keeping score, you're rewarding. You're not saying you're about to disappoint us. So we got to keep finding some our emotional intelligence czar in these organizations to look at these messages going out and going, no, 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 no. This is what we got to get better at. We got to understand resonance and receptivity, not just what we want. So I thought that was a good example. Okay, good stuff coming in. Let's see if we can pick
oh
it
my
up.
goodness. So I'll share a comment from Heather Thompson, who um, is really poised for tremendous growth and is already seeing tremendous growth in our organization. She says, "Happy New Year. We've done the traditional or expected thank you letters to each donor and sent email and social media messaging thanking everyone who supported us through November and December. And she has her CEO and board members making calls and sending emails to new donors and asking them how they found us, why they chose to give. And they're also doing that for higher level end of year donors. So
Fabulous.
that's absolutely fabulous. Matthew Asselford, he says, I sent out a donor impact letter or annual survey to all donors from the previous calendar year by the end of January. So that's
Great.
an annual effort. Um, and indeed, and Debbie Myers says loyalty shouldn't be transactional,
Yeah, they
which I
see
think
that's
we
it.
agree with.
While all these things we're hearing are wonderful, I congratulate you. Again, let's keep reminding ourselves it isn't just the volume, it's sometimes the tone. And then sometimes within the volume, we have to disaggregate. Did we have a donor who hit an anniversary in terms of the number of years of loyal giving? Is there anybody else who we think we need to pay attention to, who we noticed in the last year, maybe being more sensitive, right? So personalize wherever possible, but I applaud you for the timing of these, for recognizing the moment, and then making the most of the resources you have, which includes personalizing wherever possible. And I know also remember we can personalize according to groups. If we've aggregated people according to certain groupings, like we know what they care about based on their giving, can we reach out to them? And another conversation I had this morning is the simple power now, not last year, but now, of focus groups. What's on the drawing board in terms of materials that you're developing? If you had different mailers or different pieces you used last year, and you weren't sure which one worked best, how about going back to some of your folks and saying, will you join us
Your
for an
donors.
hour? Right?
Exactly.
Just this is a virtual focus group is the simplest thing to do. And I wonder if we couldn't set targets for ourselves. It's like, why couldn't we do one of those a week? That's not hard.
Mm-hmm.
With at least invite 10 donors. You get credit for inviting them, whether they attend or not. It's this, I always say, relationships start how? With conversation. And then from conversation, we learn more about each other. So what's the most important thing to do in donor relations is to sustain conversation and find any reason to ask an interesting question, or to take something off your desk and say, what do you think? Which of these do you like best? Or I'm not sure which way to go about the next engagement event. What do you think? If we can get in a habit of thinking about this repository of donors out there as a kind of a brain trust, a think tank, a group of colleagues, and just keep running my ideas by them, we'll do good, we'll make them feel better, and we're going to learn a whole lot. I mean, you're going to get some great stuff that we can all learn from. Louis, what
Not
else?
only what And not only what you learned, right, Jim? I mean, I can't say how many times I've had either unsolicited gift upgrades,
Yeah.
sometimes significant, really good advice. There's just it seems like such a no-brainer, right? And if you're logging your visits and that's your metric, well, what an easy way to actually do something productive with them, right?
Yes.
Really good comments here for you, Jim. Let me try to, let me see. Anne Criswell, she's asking, are development officers having scheduling conversations, or I guess, are they scheduling conversations with new donors? She's asking everybody.
Yeah.
Lots of interest in the annual survey concept.
Yeah, please understand that if you reach out to donors, and even new donors, you have to say why. You can't just say, I'd like to talk to you. That's going to scare them. That's where that mistrust in the amygdala is going to pop up. You got to say, we're looking at, early stage strategic planning. I've got a couple of pieces I want to thinking about sending out. Somebody's proposed an idea. Let them know. And it's the specificity that will then trigger the trust gene and bring them into conversation. Just don't say, I'm a development officer and I want to talk to you. That's fraught with
or
fear.
that old one of, well, I'll be in your area on this date, as if that were a reason to meet. I found that works less and less. I don't know about you, Jim.
Yes, that's right.
I'm
Want to
going to be
meet?
in
Yeah,
Boston.
yeah. Somebody
So
said,
loving that. Sorry, go ahead.
no, you please.
Oh, I was just reading the chats. Have you seen, the comments are coming in fast and furious. Have you seen an ideal cadence for contacting donors? Everyone is different, but what is the general consensus? And this is a comment that's coming to us from Facebook. So
That's a great
so great.
question. And I can't say we have science, but again, think about it in a kind of a human way. I would submit to you, maybe put it in a negative framework. You don't want a month to go by without an attempt to interact. A month seems to be, if you go beyond it, perilous. And from my own experience and anecdotal experience in working with clients, that's what we shoot for. And then If you have a real reason to do something more often, then of course do it. But really try to create a discipline and a series of systems that remind you it's been a month. And what's the simplest, most cost effective thing, scalable thing I can do to sustain the conversation?
Mhm. Exactly. And you can nowadays you can do so many things on video that, are relatively scalable. Our office has a
I'd love to ask people
yeah.
about the best questions because someone mentioned that, and that's something I work on all the time is the question that prompts the reflection. So does anybody want to share a really good question they've asked that's caused a donor to think, right? And so I've and Lewis and I can get you that. I've got all kinds of questions for different kinds of donors at different times that I've put on LinkedIn. But has anybody found a kind of a question that really makes donors stop and think and reveals something important? I've mentioned many times one of the most important is tell us about your best philanthropic experience. Tell us about your best giving experience. When did you feel valued? When did you feel your money made a difference? Because we want to learn from it. You see, that will reveal so much about the donor, their propensities, their passions, and know how you can work with them because they're going to start telling you what was most joyous about a particular experience. That's what needs to get logged. And as we do that with more and more donors, we'll start to see patterns to that. But we'd love to hear anybody has a favorite question. If you don't have one, I can tell you a fun personal anecdote. All right, how have they
I'll kick
been
it off, Jim.
connected? Here we go. Look, here they're coming in right now. How have they been connected with the college since they graduated, and particularly, what's been satisfying, what hasn't? But here's another one for you because I'm a great believer in class notes for those of you who are in higher education. Is what's the best thing that's happened to you personally or professionally in the last year? People will watch how often they'll want to tell you about some positive development in their career. They're proud of it, and they want alma mater. In the case, again, for those of you in higher education, they want alma mater to know. So here we go. Here are some other ones coming in. Questions coming in. I want to make sure we do justice to those.
Absolutely. And our common
What?
friend, Ron Cohen, has a great one. How are we doing? Just
How
as
are we
simple as
doing?
that.
Yeah, it was just the mayor of New York, Ed Koch, used to go around saying that all the time. How am I doing? How am I doing? What about our organization makes you proud? Is a good one, and if you don't mind, be careful with that because it sounds a little bit if like you and I are friends for me to say, "What about me do you like?" as opposed to me saying, "Tell me what I want to know something good that's happened to you." You see, it's got to be both. One's fine, but we need the reciprocity there.
And I found, Jim, I don't know what you feel about this, that donors are increasingly resistant to having words put in their mouth.
Oh,
So it feels like you're teeing them up to say, I'm proud. Well, maybe they're not proud. Maybe they have a problem.
absolutely. So, yeah, tell me about your most memorable experience you had in nature. Well, then that's sweet because that kind of puts people into the spiritual side of things. Now, think if they represent, what do you call them? Land banks, land grant, land preserving nonprofits. What a great question to ask your donors, right? Because they're people that if you're a nonprofit dealing with pets, tell us, tell us the sweetest kind of moment you ever had with your dog or cat or whatever. So we could ask questions specific to what we do. If we're in higher education, who was your favorite teacher? What class did you learn the most from? What did you think wasn't valuable in college but now think is invaluable? You see, I think we could use our collective brain power here to come up with some questions we would love to think about, reflect on, and would be wonderful ways to start and sustain conversations.
So,
Um,
Jim, let me ask you a question about operationalizing
yeah,
this. If it's in your portfolio, you have 20, 30, 150 people, that's okay. You can kind of keep track of what everybody's interested in. what smart ways, and I feel you're going to say you start building these communities of people with
Yep.
common interests. What smart ways have you been to apply what you learn when you ask these questions, which sometimes I find is the missing link, right? We ask, and then we don't do anything about it, you know?
Ah, yeah. So good point. So you ask, and let's say you tier your portfolio, and you say, okay, I'm going to tier my portfolio into three parts, and I'm going to spend 50% of my time with the top third. Why? Supposedly, they're my best prospects. They have the strongest probability of being closed. So if I close them, I can then spend more time with others, right? You develop a kind of a logic, a discipline. You ask the best questions you can that you know of that top third. It shouldn't be a huge group if we're doing our job right. Somewhere between 30 and 50, not a huge group. So, excuse me. How about
No worries.
COVID related questions? Are you dispirited by this new wave, this new Omicron wave? Is it dispiriting? How's your family doing with it? Right? Just little things like that could be quite, particularly if you have an anecdote to relate. Here's what we're seeing here. Here's how we're learning to cope with it here. We're having more conversations among ourselves about how to cope with this moment, right? If you have any advice, about people who are dispirited. If you've come up with a coping mechanism, I'd love to share it with my staff or my colleagues, you see? But you then, to Lewis's point, what are you learning about who they are when those answers come in, about where they operate from, about what their value sets and their sensitivities are? This is what we're looking for, is what makes them tick, whether it's their animating passions, their kind of a quest in life, a kind of a driving purpose, something that informs who they are. And I would submit to you that in 5 questions or so, you can get really deep insight into who somebody is, what gets them up in the morning, what guides the way they conduct themselves in life, and therefore start trying to feed that back to them. And I call that plug-in opportunities. So I know let's say I know you're spiritual, I'm picking up on this, and I see a new ethics initiative forming on campus. One of my clients, Dickinson, is trying to work ethics across the curriculum. Okay, there's a message I want to push out to that person or that group of people I've seen who are kind of driven by doing good, and realize doing good makes a good society that performs at a high level. If somebody's more interested in a particular discipline, business or engineering, right, and they don't reveal a lot emotionally, I'm going to go, okay, there's content there that when we start to create it, publicize it, I can just customize it. Thought you'd like to see, right? So you're routing. That's all you're doing. You're not recreating stuff. You're just routing. Well, that's incredibly helpful, right? So we try different things. If you'll forgive me for this, I think I've told this story not on Lewis's point, but one time I was at UC San Diego, and they did a study. Our researchers did a study saying that it revealed that long-term users of marijuana did not suffer from long-term memory loss. So I pushed it out to everybody who graduated in the 60s and 70s and said, relax, right? Just and people laughed and had a lot of fun with it, right? It was just one of those human moments where we can sort of tease one another and, sort of speak to generational differences. Anyway, you see where I'm going is you're a router, and you're either trying to route to your most important individuals or your most important clusters, groups or clusters, and people cluster around certain value sets. We can see it in their political choices, we can see it in their lifestyle choices, etc. And we can certainly see it around subject matter to which they gravitate, art, music, science, right? So be a good router, which is emotionally intelligent, and realize that's good fundraising strategy. That's good
Exactly.
cultivation, because you're maintaining regular contact, you're attempting to foster conversation, you're watching response, and you're trying to use response to further customize. Hope that all makes sense. Right?
Absolutely. It's like holding a mirror, right? It's not so much that um that paradigm for marketing where it's all about us and the messages that we want to push out. It's about holding a mirror up to people, and this is important to you. No.
Yeah, you see some more questions coming in. What are you looking forward to this
What are
year?
you looking exactly when you did something good, ethical? This is all fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Jim, you mentioned some conversation on loyalty and loyal donors. That got me thinking about that specific groups. How important are they? Should you be asking them more
Oh,
than others or less because they're
oh,
already loyal?
oh. You should, because it is a remarkable virtue from which you will continue to benefit. So let's deconstruct this. Um, when we look at successful campaigns and we say, where did the most money come from? What do we see? People who had already given estate gifts, who, if re-engaged, increase the size of their estate gift, give major gifts, or give blends of the two. Then you go, well, who are these people? Because they keep doing these remarkable things. And what do you discover, Lewis? That most of them, the vast majority of them, were loyal donors of 20 years or more, or highly satisfied major gift donors of 2 or 3 iterations. So you see, you already got the pattern going. It's yours to screw up. So the more you reinforce, the more you secure the outcome. But to your point, Lewis, where smugness will get us in trouble is most people, or the data says people give to 4.5 organizations. Who is their top philanthropic priority? So you may be getting 20 years of loyalty and go, we got the estate gift, but unless and until you figure out or ask who's your top philanthropic priority, you may not get the lion's share of it. You may not get any of it. And you got to figure out what it is about the top philanthropic priority that you can best approximate so that you move up. So loyalty is wonderful. It has a profound payoff if you continue to engage the loyal, but then you want to win placement, ranking within the loyal, and you don't learn that, you don't get there until you conduct an interview with whom you're most loyal to say, what, this is remarkable. Tell us the story. Why? What inspired it? What continues? Oh, and by the way, to which cause or purpose do you give the most, and why? And what can we learn from them?
So
Oh,
Jim, can I share something from a presentation you and I are giving later on next month?
absolutely.
So just one slide. We don't want to bore people. We want folks to ask your questions, but I will, if I can figure this out, um, I will share just one slide. It's called Assessing Donor Quality, and we're doing this at CASE on February 13. Jim, I thought this was amazing as a data. Can you see it?
I
Would you like to
can.
comment on that?
I can. It's, yeah. So speak to that, Lewis. Tell us just what jumped out at you, and then we can all comment.
So absolutely, this is a large study. So big data, lots of donors. What it measures is the number of consecutive years of giving in the last 10 years. Of course, Jim, you shared more industry-wide data, but for this specific study. So for instance, if somebody had given 5 years in a row at any time during those 10 years, they'd be five. If they'd given 2 years in a row, well, at any point in those last 10 years, they'd be a two. So when we looked at the average consecutive number of years giving, and we sorted that by what their largest gift to the institution had been, it was like magic. It just like sorted itself, it sorted on its own. Very clearly, the more consecutive years of giving, the
Yep.
larger the chance, given the capacity and all those things, of course, of transformational gift. Is that
Yep.
is that accurate?
That's it. And then think about this. Where do we lose most donors? After the first gift. But if
Mm.
we retain them just 3 years, we then have this much higher set of probabilities of giving more loyally, more generously, right? So here's
Mm,
this one, we got to figure out why we lose donors after the first year. We got to get obsessive about that. We got to really work on 3 years of retention. And when we do, we've made all our jobs easier. We've deepened relationships. We've built a philanthropic culture and community, right? We're putting roots down. And that's what so many I see missing in so many organizations is this obsession about annual results, which has pulled out the root system. The loyal are only the older folks who have given for a long, long time and of a different generation. Younger generations aren't showing the same loyalty. What we're talking about now is starting to let some roots grow, and from roots, we see many wonderful things happen, and the yield of philanthropic fruit becoming stronger and stronger with every passing year. I always go back to that orchard metaphor because it's so apt.
this is beautiful. Jim, what have you found are the characteristics of organizations that do focus on this 3-year period, that are focusing on their loyal donors? What type of leadership do they have? What type of culture? I would be really interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, this is interesting. And I think, and something that I've come to appreciate more and more as time goes on, one, continuity of leadership, right? In a place where people are committed to the place. And so that would include continuity of leadership at many different levels and continuity of staff. So when staff is loyal, when leaders are loyal to an organization, it's evidence of caring about the organization. When leaders keep turning over and staff keep turning over, who really cares about the sustainability of the organization and therefore the community that surrounds it? So what is
Mhm.
it that we can do to build loyalty within to create believability and faithfulness within the place, including the advancement staff? So just parenthetically, we talk about this great, what do we call it? Great,
Resignation?
yes, resignation. I think it's a misnomer because it looks like a great reshuffle of people sort of going elsewhere, not, but maybe rethinking about where they want to be, what they want to do with their lives. And I think what we're seeing in a lot of advancement operations is staying but being resigned that this place is tactical, operational, doesn't really get what philanthropy is about. I'll stay because my family is here or this, that, or the other, but I'm going to treat it like a job. I'm going to go home at the end of the day. Well, this is what we want to turn around. How do we turn it around? By listening to them, by saying, no, we do want to do justice to our donors. We do want to value philanthropy. Yes, we want to hold ourselves to goals, including annual goals. But we know to this discussion, Lewis, annual goals keep rolling around. And so if you just obsess about annual goals and don't put down the root system, it starts to look like a more desperate downward spiral. So who cares about that? Well, in organizations where people care about each other, believe in the mission, and care about retaining support within, in other words, valuing one another, then that starts to spread to valuing everybody who's a part of the enterprise. I think our great challenge is the breakdown in community. We're seeing organizations persist, but community beneath them erode. And that's
Mhm.
really hard to turn around.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you'd like to join other like-minded individuals, build community, see how you can make your own organizations more community-minded, pandemic permitting, Jim and I will be hosting a small gathering in New York just prior to our presentation. So February 13,
Well, we're happy if it
2011.
gets big. If more of you
Well, it
come,
would
we'll
be
be happy.
It would also, I'll leave this on screen for a while, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of folks join us. But that is so interesting, and your focus on community. There are lots of projects now, involving crypto stuff, I'm going to say. But what I love about it, what I find promising about it, is that they've gone a little bit beyond that, oh, Bitcoin speculation, and they're talking a lot about community and kind of putting your money where
Yes.
your mouth is and building groups of like-minded. It sounds so much like your communities of purpose, Jim. It's amazing.
Yeah, we'll see what happens when the communities, the constructs that we of a generation ago don't prove to be viable anymore. What do? We create our own for our own purposes to satisfy our own needs. And, those needs can be financial, spiritual, but there is a need, I think, just to affiliate with kindred spirits, right? This is as old as time. So what are we doing to recognize that and foster that? The organizing principles of one generation become the artificial constructs of another. We keep relying on those older constructs when we need to be listening to, well, how are people reconstructing themselves today? And watch younger generations, watch how they are creating their own communities of purpose, their own corridors of purpose, right? In many different ways. Pick up on that. How? Again, go to your younger alums, your rising stars, your younger donors, somebody who's given disproportionately according to their age, a 30-year-old donor who's given, I don't know, $5,000, and interview that person. Say, what's going on in your life? Where are you finding satisfaction? How do you find soul connections or friends, or what social media do you use most satisfyingly? There's always the fun side of life, but where do you find community meaning? How's that working for you, right? That's where we'll then pick up on these new constructs forming and go, how do we come alongside? How do we make that happen? This will become a huge issue, community. And then let's start thinking about what it takes to build community. Lewis, is what? Empathy, um, collaboration. Think about all the skill sets that have been sort of devalued in traditional
There you go.
fundraising, which now become invaluable in starting to draw people forward, make them feel it's safe, make them feel that it's authentic. Where are we developing those skill sets, and where are we allowing them to do their best work? We can certainly do that in and among fundraisers, but that's hard, right? If fundraisers don't have anything preceding that, if they're trying to become a remedial force for community building, what's the instigating force for community building? Who's reaching out? And ideally, this would come from the top of the organization. Might need to be staffed, but it should be coming from the top. I want to learn. I'm asking people to listen to you. I will get back to you about what I've learned. I'll let you know how it informs our strategic plan. I'll be honest about where we screwed up, right? I think this is what people are looking for in leaders, is the listener in chief who listens, synthesizes, and then says, this is what we learned. Oh, wow, now I feel a part of this organization. I feel I matter. How do we teach this? Where do we teach this? How do we get this across, right? These are our great challenges. And no matter how good you are, no matter how last year looked, you see, I promise, if we get into your data, you're going to see generational slippage. You're going to see concentration of wealth. You're going to see leading and lagging indicators that should cause you concern that what we relied on last year and the decade before is going to look less and less reliable this year and every passing year. It's universally true. If there's an exception out there, please send me some data. We'll give you the data we're looking at. I'd love to see why. I'd love to understand. Maybe you're a brand new organization responding to a need that hadn't been done justice to before. But if you're an organization that's 10 years old or more, all those things I just described to you are true. What are you doing? Who recognizes this need to regenerate community if you're going to regenerate philanthropy?
That's beautiful. And I have to put a plug in for Muhlenberg College. Our president actually has gone on record several times saying communities are superpower. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my goodness, mana! It's like it's quite
Wonderful.
something. I'd love to hear maybe your reactions, Jim, to what folks are thinking about in 2022 as fundraisers, frontline fundraisers? Do they feel um, like the atmosphere is changing? Are they, are they feeling this change that you talk about? Are they feeling something else? I know we very often
Yeah.
kind of stay in our little, is last month, is this month better than last month? And we're not thinking of the big trends, but I do feel like this is very much something that is in the air. So I don't know if folks would like to share their thoughts about how their donors are reacting.
Yeah, and if I could, I know this is well, I just think I should. I know it. But there, there's a major trade publication that keeps talking about this year being better than last year. That all the indicators are, and I find that one troubling because what do they mean? They mean more money will come in from fewer people, and they don't say that. So that then justifies in the minds of people who don't understand what's going on, oh, let's do a campaign and let's do our usual wish list. Because now, happy days are here again. So let's redound to those old traditional harvesting fundraising tactics. What bothers me is you can't say we're going to have a better year. You have to make it clear that what this looks like is that we're going to get bigger gifts from fewer, wealthier people that are going to drive up the totals, even as participation recedes and even as younger generations go off the grid and give in their own way and don't seek tax credit or institutional recognition for it, right? So to this, and I noticed that sometimes unscrupulous consultants do this, is a lot of money out there, money on the table, all great things going to happen. A little bit like saying all you'd have to do is go shake the tree in that orchard and all that low hanging fruit will fall off. I'm sorry, that is not an accurate depiction of what's going on. And if we care about the organizations we represent, and we care about not just the physical plant, but the mission and what the mission represents, then we want that to be sustainable, right? We want to do things that will sustain mission, not just raise more money this year, but sustain mission for at least a decade. What are we doing there, right? So we keep nudging people, too many of us, into this tactical box about what we raise in any given quarter or any given year. But to say this is an era of sustainability across the globe, sustainability is the watchword. And the natural resources that we depended on are depleting. And the natural human resource that we depended on is depleting, which is support of institutions. Where's the strategy for sustainability?
Jim, don't
So,
get me started on our trade publications. I don't know if folks here will recall these headlines that thank you calls don't work, according to a very prestigious study, which was done by call center callers 7 months after the gift. And in fact, looped in the group of people who were on the list to get a call with those who actually got the call. And the study showed that people who spoke with a person actually did increase their gift, but no, the headlines are thank you calls don't work. Oh.
And did that organization have a motive in? I mean, was that outcome predetermined before the study was ever done?
I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. It's really discouraging. And then here are people representing our field who just don't understand it, right? They need an advisory board in those organizations of people who are active frontline fundraisers, right? And when you look at consultants, you really do and should look at the fundraising record of the people who are representing those organizations and work for you. A lot of them are telling you things because they don't, I'm not saying they're bad people, they don't know any better because they never were an active or highly successful fundraiser. They might have been a manager or a boss, right? So we got to be real careful about where we're drawing our information, Louis. I think this is why what you're doing in these conversations that you're having with different people, including me, are really valuable. But it's a little hard for me to see because who comes to me are the people who self-identify with what I'm saying. The people who don't never
Follow
really
you on LinkedIn, and I invite everybody to follow you here if you're interested in honing your craft, basically.
But look at your colleagues here in the chat room, folks, because these are your kindred spirits who you can also reach out to, who you can also sustain conversations with I know so many of you, you're first rate. So I love to be a kind of an aggregating force, but look at the talent we've got here. Look at these intelligent comments. Look at these ethical observations being made. So please pay attention to one another and start conversations within and among.
I will share a thought from Heather Thompson. Like a lot of human services orgs, we saw a big surge of support in 2020 as those who could give wanted to take some action to help in the face of unprecedented crisis. Looking at 2021, it seems we've built stronger connections with a subset of those 2020 donors, and we're seeing their generosity continue and grow, but we are seeing fewer gifts overall.
Yep,
So the
that
same
would be
trend.
that would be what I expect. So the reason they respond is because they saw you responding to a great human crisis, and they saw the impact, and so they're going to stay with you. So I'd say several things have to happen. Is you have to keep projecting the greater impact you will have this year, and then communicating what that is. Right. This is what we did last year. Here's where new need or greater need or ongoing need remains in front of us. Here's how we're going after it. Here's where your money makes a difference. And then report. You gave, here's what we did. It's that lesson learned from this very difficult year that we've got to now incorporate into our DNA. And that's how we will sustain as much support as possible. So it's interesting that it's fewer, but let's see. I don't know what that means, except lots of people say, I'll give when I feel like it. They don't say, I'm going to give every year. They're more impulse buyers, right? So we just have to accept that and see what the next driving impulse might be. But if you take that
Jim,
line of reasoning, please go ahead,
Jim,
please.
something you posted really inspired me, and you posted about seeing those lines, right?
Everybody
How do we,
told me.
yeah, how do we do more of that? How do we sow the line of scholarship applicants? How do we sow the line of service recipients that need our, in Heather's case, human services? That got me thinking, how do we do that in that such a tactile, immediate
Yeah.
way?
So what a fabulous question, because I was thinking the same thing is, how do we show the lines? Well, pictures, perhaps, maybe graphs. Student applications last year with little bodies, student apps this year with bodies representing each one 100 or 1,000, right? I think, we need to use visualization better. Here's where we were, baseline. Here's what we're seeing this year. Here's what we need, visualizations, so that I can then see for myself. Data visualize. So anybody out there in the visualization of data, I think you may be in the important area, but is it pictures as well? I mean, could we go around? I don't know what that would be, depending on what the lines would be. But in some cases, it could be lines of human being lined up for health services or shots or vaccine shots, right? So when people can see for themselves or see on television or in media or in social media, you see a picture is worth 1,000 words. And a visual representation might be the next best thing to words. And of course, you're talking to the ultimate word person here, so it's hard for me to acknowledge.
Well, and I'll take it one step beyond that. Video is seems to be working
Of
very well
course,
now. I'm
visual,
hearing this in
anything
the
visual.
field a lot.
But remember, Lewis, it will be the comparative. It will be the lines, right? It's not just the video. It's somehow this is what we see now, right? So they can see the difference that more, what people meant, I think, when they said the lines was never seen anything like that before. Never knew so many people, right? So anything we can do in any visual form, I think will help. But remember, visualizations have to be backed up by real hard impact data. Can't make this up. Those food
Absolutely.
banks were
There's a
really scrambling to get that stuff out. I had one comment that was at a bit of an edge on the LinkedIn post that said, what we really need to do is address the underlying issues of hunger. I agree. But look look, what we're trying to share is look how donors responded and why they responded and learn from that. And the same person said, sometimes all they get in those food banks is like crappy craft food meals. Well, I would submit to you that that meal looks pretty good if you're hungry and there's not enough food on the family dinner table, right? So you may think you're more perfect, but people will respond to the greatest, most basic human need. And I think people will give to the alleviation of the greatest, most basic human need. So remember that, how to tell those stories.
And of course, all of this needs to be done ethically without,
Oh,
there's a term called poverty porn, and but
oh,
I think
and
your
pet
concept is
porn, and pet porn. Yeah, all kinds of,
absolutely.
pulling at the heartstrings. It's really kind of false. That's a good injunction, Lewis. It's got to be done authentically and ethically. And part of us reporting on our successes, it isn't always perfect. It isn't always pretty. It doesn't always work, but we learn as we go. Right?
So I
Powerful.
have we're reaching the end of the hour, so I invite everybody to send your final observations, your questions to Jim. I'm going to kick it off with a comment that may start some discussion, and if we run out of time, we will continue it. Please connect with Jim. Make sure you're following him and you're asking him questions. I know from a good source that he actually responds, and he's one of the most fabulous members of the community of our industry. But Jim, you spoke about having this perspective, being an advocate for the donor perspective in organizations. And I read a study recently about how just saying that 0% of a donation goes to overhead um, was something that donors valued a lot. And I shared this study, and I got a lot of pushback saying, well, that's not smart, that's bad for the sector. Obviously overhead is needed where humans are overhead. um, but I was conflicted in a way because, well, is there not a way to make it work? Could you not have
Yeah.
a subset fundraise for the overhead, and then for other people who apparently care so much about this? I don't know.
Yeah. So,
How do you work
it,
on that with your clients?
again, Lewis, what a great question. You pick up on things that so many people don't. What overhead means to them is bureaucracy, not the cost of doing business, right? So they don't want anything to go to bureaucracy, but they will if your budget includes the cost of doing business. But please think about this, because if I'm going to go far out and almost do a kind of Harvard Business Review kind of publication of long-term strategy, I'm going to say what people are looking for is an organization that is so adaptive that it is really organized for a one overriding purpose, and that is to launch a series of impact oriented initiatives. It is not organized to sustain itself, to glorify itself, to feed itself. You see, all that organization exists to do is to become the quartermaster of a number of initiatives, each of which are responding to rapidly emerging societal needs. It's incredibly lean at the top, and in its adaptations keeps moving people around to create task teams best suited to drive those initiatives through to completion. So they don't want to feel as if they're feeding this big fixed structure of people who are removed from reality, and they think the reason they're removed because they never hear from them, don't know who they are, and kind of hear a kind of an occasional whininess from them, right? Uh, Redirect that language to go, it's not going into any bureaucracy. And by the way, we want to show you an organization that is incredibly lean and obsessed with deliverability and constant adaptation. Watch what happens when the toughest business guy or gal in the world hears that.
Okay, so another problem solved, Jim, and we did all of that in under 1 hour.
Well, at least we got a lot of kindred spirits thinking about the same issues, and we've planted seeds, and they've planted seeds in our brains. And so this is how we'll keep this momentum going. This is how we will change the business and make it more soulful and more productive. So thank you for all your contributions. Thank you, all those who like a LinkedIn post, who write a nice note. I want you to know I steward you just like I did donors. When you like something, I go to your LinkedIn profile, I read about you, I reflect on who you are, and I silently say thank you. So I want you to know that your liking post is incredibly meaningful, and I hope you know that at least some sort of a spiritual level, I'm stewarding you to the best of my ability.
That's so wonderful. And I have to say, getting to build this community with you and with other folks in our industry has been one of the highlights of 2021. Speaking of that, I hope lots of us can meet in New York, February 13, 11 a.m. Langley Innovations and Donor Participation Project will be getting together. Message us if you'd like more details. But thank you so much, Jim. It's been a
Thank you,
wonderful
Louis,
pleasure.
and we're all thrilled and so glad you're doing what you're doing. You know, you've given a lot of us a lot of hope. So thank you.
Hey, onward and upward. Have a great day.